Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Obsessed Live Show. Yay, it's Friday. And today I'm really excited to be chatting with the amazing Browen Sciortino, who is a simplicity expert. Oh my God, that sounds amazing. Hey, Bronwen, how are you today?
Hey, Annette, can't wait to see where our conversation takes us.
I know it could be, and I just keep saying to everybody, if you were listening when we weren't going live, we were having a ripper conversation. But tell everybody who's listening, what is a simplicity expert? What does that mean? It seems pretty simple to me.
Yeah, it's a great question because I get asked a lot. Oh, so you're a simplicity expert. That must mean you're a minimalist. That must mean that you miss out on a lot of things in your life. That must mean that you deny yourself a lot of things. That must mean that, you really don't get to do a lot of stuff. And actually, it's the exact opposite of that. So a simplicity expert really just helps you to find the simplest pathway forward in your life. So cut the noise, cut the complexity, cut the things that make life really difficult, and just move forward in a really simple way.
Oh, that seems pretty simple. So
Yeah.
how does one become a simplicity expert? What happened to drive you to go, okay, this is where I feel that I can best serve?
Yeah, so for me, I spent almost 2 decades in the corporate world. And I pushed myself so hard and for so long that I broke spectacularly. And I went from being an award-winning executive to on the floor, unable to cope in life and unable to stop crying. And that happened to me in a matter of minutes. And it took me 2 years of the most intensive, invasive, and overwhelming work to get back to a point where I could just exist in the basics in life. And it was another 12 months of that work before I knew who I was, what I wanted to be doing, and really importantly, how I wanted to be doing that.
Wow. So just the build up of, I guess, when you're working in corporate, you just put your head down, you bum up, you do what you have to do, you're being paid the big bucks. And you didn't realize that there was something kind of a little bit off about life.
Yeah, I think you get caught in the spiral. That is life. What I realized along the way when I was piecing my life back together, because I literally shattered into a million pieces on the floor around me, and I had to pick up each piece and look at it individually and really decide whether or not that was going to come into Browen 2.0 and move forward with me in my life. And what I realized about the way I'd been living before is that had been really shaped and molded by a lot of the conditioning that I'd received growing up, a lot of the messaging that I'd received about what was appropriate for me to do in my life and what wasn't, what I was intelligent enough to do or too intelligent for, those sorts of things. And my entire life was built on a track and a pathway that I didn't enjoy. I ended up working in an industry that wasn't of interest to me. I ended up studying a course at university that I really had no interest in whatsoever. So my whole life had gone down this pathway of, meeting the expectations of people around me. And I just thought that I was doing what I was supposed to do. I was ticking all the boxes. I was doing everything I'd been told was right for me. And actually, I was seriously ill and desperately unhappy. And I just thought that I was, living my lot in life, and that I was doing the things that I was supposed to do to get ahead and be successful.
Doesn't sound like Bronwen factored into any of that at all.
No. Well, Browen didn't exist really. There was 3 different versions of Browen that I had created to really just hold place in different parts of my life. I had Bronwen at work, Bronwen at home, and then I had Bronwena. And Bronwena came out. She came out after a few drinks, and her entire role was just to entertain people and keep people happy, and in that sort of party environment.
Wow. Just from what you're saying, that's pretty intensive work, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why do we as humans wait till we get to the point where we're in a million pieces on the floor and then go, what? Like, now I've got to clean this mess up.
Yeah, I think, a lot of the time through my recovery, what I heard a lot was it's okay for you to do things differently because, you've had a breakdown, you've had cancer, you've had all these things. And what I learnt from that is that we're all waiting for like this traumatic event to give us permission to do things differently. It's like without the traumatic event, we don't feel like we're allowed to do things differently. So there's that aspect of it. But I think also that along the way, we've been taught that change is really hard and that it's so hard, it's not worth it. And it's not until we actually experience the traumatic event and we come really close to facing death that we actually realize that change is not that big a deal. And essentially, what we've been taught now is that we fear change more than we fear death. And until we actually face death a little bit closer, we don't realize that change is kind of this insignificant little thing that we've just been taught to fear so incredibly.
So, when you're going through this process of rebuilding yourself, did you have some backslides where you went, "I don't know, I can't do this"? Like, I was actually pretty comfortable, even though I was miserable. I was actually pretty comfortable back there.
Uh, not so much. Not so much backslides like that. For me, because I was completely obliterated. I was literally in a million pieces on the floor. I had to start from scratch again. It's like, if you can imagine that in 2 seconds' time, someone clicks their fingers and everything you know about life is gone. So all your intelligence is gone. Your ability to think about things and make decisions for yourself is gone. You have a whole heap of people sitting around you and they're all asking you questions, but you can't cognitively process what they're asking you. You can't understand what they're asking you, and you can't form the words to answer them. Everything around you is moving at normal speed, but it feels like you're sitting in a void where time is standing still. So everything's moving, but you're not. And then overlay on top of that, you don't understand any of that. So you can't explain any of that to anyone. It is the most frightening, terrifying experience because it's literally like someone's clicked their fingers and everything changes.
I
And
actually felt a little bit anxious while you were describing
yeah,
that. It was kind of
yeah.
like, oh, I feel like I need a hug now.
And essentially, for me, what I learnt was, and I think this is really where my simplicity pathway started, at the absolute depths of the pit. When you break like that, you end up in this deep, dark pit. And at the absolute basics of the pit, the very bottom of the pit where you're at your darkest, you're faced with one basic question. And that is, do you want to live or do you want to die? And that is the simplicity of life. That really is the simplicity of the question that you're faced with when you get to that point. And having made the decision to live and to move forward, then it began the absolute incredible journey to claw my way back to being whole and vibrant and living a happy, rewarding and successful life. And along the way, it was so traumatic for me. I basically experienced my entire life's emotion in a 2-year period. So it was so traumatic, so emotional, and I literally just could not stop crying. And so for me, it wasn't so much about backslides trying to go back to the old way of doing things. For me, it was just about trying to move through the emotion to get to a point where every day was just so much more stable, and I felt like I could, step out in a different way and do what I need to be doing in the world without letting people down. Because some days I would wake up and it was all that I could do to just get out of bed. because I was just so overcome with the trauma and the emotion of it, and releasing that from my system. So, every day I now teach people there's a different way to live, so they don't have to get to that point, and they don't have to spend so much time recovering from that traumatic event, because we don't need it. We can step forward in a different way now, do that really easily, and completely change the trajectory of our life.
So I laughed. Haley just said, "What happened? I just missed it." Haley, we've been talking for 10 minutes. So for those of you who are just joining us, I'm here with Bronwen, who's a simplicity expert, and she's just telling the story of how she became a simplicity expert. And basically what happened is, after a couple of decades in corporate, she just broke from the expectations that everybody had of her, she had of herself, and she spent 2 years recovering. And it's quite an amazing journey. And you've documented this in a book, haven't you? A couple of books that you've written on the topics that I'm more than happy to share in the comments once we've finished, so that you can read more about Bronwen's journey, but how she recovered. Bronwen, when you break like that, is there shame attached as well that makes that journey a little bit harder?
Yeah, I think the first thing you face is that you failed. And it is, Tracy, thank you so much. That's such a beautiful comment. Yeah, I think the first thing that happens when you break like that is that you feel the failure. And because you don't understand it, you don't understand what's going on. It's so hard to understand that is the first place that you step into. And for me, it was so intense. It was so traumatic. And I think the first thing my husband will tell you is the first thing that I said to him when we got in the car to drive home, because I broke in a doctor's office. So I broke publicly, which was fantastic. I didn't have a chance to break within my own four walls. I did that publicly, which was fantastic.
Well, if you're going to do it, you may as well go all out.
Yeah, why not? And the first thing I said to John on the way home was, "It's okay, you don't have to stay with me, I understand." Because it was straight away, it was just that, life is completely shattered now. It's different. Everything's changed. His whole life had changed as well. And I wanted him to know that he didn't have to. I wasn't holding him to any promises or anything like that. And so you do step into that shame place. Perhaps one of the biggest shame things that I dealt with was stepping into the counselling side of things and needing psychological help, because, even 5 years ago, mental health issues still weren't really accepted as needing, a norm acceptance type thing. And so you go to the GP and you get your mental health plan done, and that puts you into the system. The government gives you support to help pay for that. And my mind went straight to, I don't want that on my record. I don't want that I needed mental health, assistance on my record, And in the scheme of things, it was such an insignificant part of the journey, but where your mind takes you and you think, you're still stuck in that, what will people think of me? What will people say about me? All of that sort of stuff. So your shame does play a role in that. For me, it was like a 5-minute thing in terms of, it was such a big thing for me. I knew that I needed help. I knew that I had to move forward in a different way, that I kind of just walked on that and walked over it. But it is a massive thing that, you do have to consider.
Absolutely. And I guess for a lot of people, that stops them in their tracks, doesn't it? Is that shame and that sense of, well, if I tell people or I'm public about this, then they're going to judge me and they're not going to want to do business with me, or they're not going to want to be my friend, or all of those things that we make up in our head. So when you've healed and you've gone, okay, now I need to find a new way to make a living, because I imagine during that 2 years you weren't back in the corporate office.
No.
It's kind of like, no, not go back
No,
there.
well, actually, 10 days after I had my breakdown, the company that both my husband and I worked for collapsed financially. So we were both out of work at the same time, which wasn't a great timing. So we
No.
had to deal with that as well. In one way, that was really fortunate for me because I didn't have the pressure of having a job to go back to. It meant that I didn't have that responsibility that I felt to step back in and try and solve everyone's problems while I was really broken. Um, but actually, what happened as part of my recovery was one of my counselors discovered that I was terrified of writing anything personal down.
Oh,
And because what came out as part of my counselling was these perfection tendencies that had been ruling my life. And one of the things that I was terrified about was that if I wrote something personal down, people could use that as evidence against me that I wasn't perfect. Like, how
wow. Oh,
complex
God,
is
I just got
that?
goosebumps.
So
Yeah.
complex, right? And when you're in that situation, when you're in that counseling situation and you identify something that you're afraid of, it becomes your homework. So I had to go home and start journaling as part of my homework. And I was so terrified of writing anything personal down. It took me 3 weeks to write one word on a page.
Wow.
That's how scared of it I was. And around about the same time in my recovery, I'd just been dipping my toe in the water to go back into social situations because I had not been able to deal with anything in life other than the basics. So I hadn't been able to go anywhere, hadn't been spending time with anyone, and I was just starting to, really dip the toe back in to go back into those social situations. And people hadn't seen me for 9 to 12 months ish. And they started saying, "Where have you been? What have you been doing? We haven't seen you." And because I was so fragile and I was so broken still, there were very few things I could talk about without just completely dissolving into tears. And it turned out that journaling was one of the things that I could talk about. And so I started talking about, this journaling process. And people started asking me, what are you journaling about? And as I started talking about some of the topics, they all started saying to me, "You have to write a book. The world needs this. You must write a book." And I was just like, "Oh, no way. That's just too much. I can't cope with that." And actually, what it did was it gave me something to focus on through my journey. And so my first book was written while I was in recovery. And it actually helped me heal. And it pretty much helped me piece together what my life needed to look like moving forwards. And then as that went out into the world and people were saying, "Oh my God, this is amazing. I love this. How else can we work with you?" Suddenly I had this global business where people were wanting keynote speeches and workshops, and how else can we work with you? Can you, what else can you do for us? Can you work with our staff? Can you work with me? And so suddenly I, had to actually start to really seriously apply these principles I'd created to make sure that my life was supported moving forwards with this global business.
Wow, what a serendipity. Like who would have like I'm a big believer in it is what it is, that out of bad can come good. And you
Yeah,
turned something that was just so crippling and horrifying for your life into something that's helped like so many people, like thousands and thousands of people with your books and your keynotes, and
yeah,
that's amazing. So for those who are listening, Bronwyn's just talking about her journey from being in a million pieces and collapsing and becoming a simplicity expert. What are some of the things that we can do now? Because, like, you and I have talked about a collective shattering. We've all
yeah,
kind of collectively dropped on the floor in some form or another in the last 2 months. We've lost our businesses, or we've lost our jobs, or, there's a whole lot of stuff going on that we weren't prepared for. So, what are some tips that you can give people that will help them move through and start healing
mm.
without having to totally shatter?
Yeah. I think It's a really important question to be asking right now, because we're hearing a lot about we're all in the same boat, we're all in this together. Everybody's in this. Everybody's experiencing this. And while that is true, globally we have been locked down. Globally, we've been put back in our boxes. Uh, but I think it's really, really important to acknowledge the individual journey that each of us has within this, because whenever we are put in a group and whenever we are grouped, it's like there are boundaries and there's stuff that's kind of added to that group. There's a definition that's given to that, and it's like we're all expected to just sit within that and accept that that's what's happening to us. And actually, as individuals, we're all extraordinary and we're all unique. And with that comes a uniqueness with the way that we need to move through this, and with what we need to give to ourselves through this. So I think the first thing is it's really important to acknowledge that you're an individual and that you have a unique experience within this, even though all of us are experiencing something together, we still have a unique experience within that. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that. The next thing is that, for some of us, there is significant grief that is being experienced at this time. Change is difficult enough for people when you choose to step into it. When it is forced on you wholeheartedly and it's like your entire life is shattered, that is significant trauma. And there is shock and grief and significant emotion that is experienced on an individual level within that. And each of us has our own filters. We have our own experiences. We carry our own memories. And so that means that grief and shock and, deep emotion will be experienced differently by all of us. So I think, it's really important to stop, acknowledge, really absorb that shock and give yourself time to recover. And by that, I mean, what do you need right now? We're seeing everyone's in the online environment. Everyone has something to say. Everyone has an opinion. There are so many experts out there, and they're all telling you from that corner of your life to the other corner of your life what you should be doing and how you should be doing it. Whether it is, here's the 7 things you should never do in a Zoom meeting. Here's, the 7 things that you can do so that you don't put on weight while you're at home. Here's the way that you can lock your fridge door because you're eating it from the fridge too often. Here's the fitness gear that you should wear while you're exercising from home. We are all unique individuals, and it's so important for us to work out what we need right now. If that means that you need to throw the schedule out of the window and you need to wake up in the morning when you wake up, not to an alarm, do that. If that means that, at the moment you need to go for a walk around the block every day, do that. Whatever you need for you right now is so important to give yourself that, because you are the only expert. You're the only authority in your life. You are the only one who knows what you need. And right now, after significant trauma and significant emotion and significant grief, you have to really soothe your soul.
What you're talking about is really challenging the status quo, aren't you? It's like, just because there's all of these voices saying, do this, have this, do whatever it is, that you don't need to just blindly accept that, and you need to look at it from, how does that position into my life right now? I guess it's about just being really smart about understanding who you are and taking the time to understand who you are.
Yeah, totally. I like to call it being a rebel in your own life. Be a rebel. I like that. Come and be a rebel with me. Like, it's great fun. And I turn things into a bit of a game. So I just sit there and if I see something, anytime I hear you have to, you should have, you need to, I just sit there and just go, oh, really? And then I just go, is that right for me? So I'll just throw a question in there that immediately stops any autopilot response I may have, so that my decisions are always made consciously.
And I get, like, in this age of of social media, like we're inundated, like there's just so much coming at us that it's like, I know I finish the end of the day, and if anyone rings me after 6 o'clock, it's like, you ain't got no chance of talking to me because my brain is done,
Yeah.
just done. How do you have some suggestions on how people can filter out those messages? That question that you suggested, is perfect. But what else can we do?
I'm generally not spending a lot of time in social media, for starters, mainly because there's been a 70% increase in the amount of time that people are spending in social media. I'm not a fan of what I like to call manipulative trigger marketing. So I'm not a fan of anything that's about hitting trigger points to get you to act in a certain way. And generally, there's a lot of fear and a lot of panic that's happening in that environment at the moment. So I'm generally spending my time in other places. Because of the principles that I set my life up on, I'm experiencing this time very differently to a lot of people. So for me, I've gone into massive creation mode. I'm creating a massive platform for professional women, and that will be released shortly. But for me, I'm experiencing this a bit differently because I didn't have significant stress levels coming into this, and because I had the tools and the wisdom, I guess, at my fingertip to actually transition through this in a different way. But most people aren't coming into it from that point of view at the moment. They're coming in from a really stressed point of view to start with. Then they got hit with a massive trauma, which adds more stress. And the other thing with the social media stuff at the moment is really understanding how secondary stress works. And secondary stress is where you're not necessarily experiencing the stress yourself, but what you are taking stress into your system through what you are seeing and hearing happening to people around you. And that doesn't have to be with you in person with the person. You can actually experience that stress response in your body simply by viewing and absorbing through technology. So whether it's the news, whether it's the social media platforms, and because there is so much that's out there at the moment that is fear-based, and it is, a lot of the stuff that goes into the online environment is probably 1% truth, and it's not necessarily positioned in a way that is unbiased or balanced. It means that you're just constantly consuming stuff that is trigger based. So it's all about hitting triggers and increasing fear and outrage. And so when you're feeding that type of energy into your system constantly, you're just running a stress response through your body. So I'm avoiding anything that is sort of fear-based, trigger-based. There's a lot of conspiracy theories that have popped up. And if you look at the timing of them, you're sort of 3 to 4 weeks into people being in lockdown. People are really scared. People are really stressed because their lives have been so badly impacted. And then you get the massive hit of the conspiracy theory, which is, again, fear and panic triggered. And it just adds the load. So I'm staying away from a lot of that. And really just asking that question, is this right for me? And that I find whenever I ask that question, it just consciously connects me with the direction that I need to be heading, and stops me from just that autopilot response to things.
So just to wrap up, because I've been all over your website, there's a blog that you did at the end of, I'm stalking you. Very nicely.
Who wouldn't want you to stalk me? Right.
Absolutely. There's so much gold that you have to share. So there was a blog that you wrote, and it says, can we really simplify life and still have everything that we want? Because, you open this with describing what people think it is that you do. You're a minimalist, and, like you're a monk sitting on top of a mountain just eating air. So can we really have a simple life and still have all of the intricacies and interesting things that happen to us?
Definitely. I would say that one of the things that I get fed back to me the most often is just how authentically I live my life. So everything I teach, I I live in my life myself. Um, and in the last 12 months alone, I have had so many cool things that have happened in my life. I have experienced so many cool things because I'm so aligned with my life. I'm so aligned with who I am. And simplicity is not about denying yourself. Simplicity is really just about aligning with the things that are right for you in your life and finding the simplest way for you to actually walk through life to be able to enjoy those things. So you can absolutely have everything that you want and still live a simple life. It's not about denying yourself or living without things. It's about living with the things that mean the most to you.
Oh, nice. So in your book, The Economy of Enough, are there tips and ideas on people how they can do that?
So all of my books are all about they're me on a page, but it's my story. But also they all have sections where you can start to ask yourself the questions that really matter. So you can start to unravel and unwrap, if you like, where you're stuck in certain areas of your life. And it's one of the things people say to me they love about the books the most is that the books not only help them to understand how they've gotten themselves to a point in their life, it then helps them move through that and ask questions that can help them move forward in a different way and in a way that's really connected with who they are.
Oh, fantastic. Well, as I said, I'll share the link when we've finished our conversation. But Bronwen, thank you so much. Thank you for being so open and sharing your story. And thank you for giving us a few tips and ideas on how we can make our lives simpler. I think that we could all use an infusion of you in our lives every week.
No, you need an infusion of you. As
Oh,
in
nice.
each of us needs an infusion of ourselves.
Absolute. Good comeback. And one final comment, authenticity is an individual's life is vital. It's beautiful. Thank you. I
Yeah,
don't know who that Facebook user is, but
I
that's
agree.
brilliant. So everybody, if you've enjoyed listening to Bronwyn today, I'm going to put the link for her book once we've finished. And if you'd like to be a guest on Obsessed live show, I'll also put the link on how you can apply to do that. And again, thank you so much for joining me, Bronwyn. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Annette. Been great to chat.